In this video, I want to address an error that's common in the Western world. Well, most of you who are watching this video are from the Western world because it's people in the Western world that most of the time have access to internet, to streaming internet like you have now, because if you didn't have streaming internet, you wouldn't be able to play this video. Or maybe someone downloaded this video and you're watching it on some screen somewhere in Central African Republic, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to address an error in Western thinking, if you want to call it that way. We know that in the Western world, individualism, neoliberal values are high. People adhere to them. Not everyone, but in general, people hold them high. Things as human rights, the rule of law. By the way, human rights are a biblical thing, but they won't credit the Most High. Okay, but that's how the world operates. One error in Western thinking that is now causing the internal demise of the communities in the Western world. Now, externally, the financial structures are still operating for now in the Western world, but socially, culturally, and from an anthropological point of view, you can see that the Western world is actually devouring itself. And this makes it weak and completely open to predators, both from the inside and from the outside. But it's mostly the predators from the inside that devour Western communities. We saw what happened, well, not saw, as if literally witnessing, because we weren't there, but we can see what happened during the First and Second World War. Now, there is no real physical military Third World War now. What you have instead is that the mimetic crisis, or the sacrificial crisis, is now working out on the local level. And the national authorities are delaying the escalation of the violence. That's what's going on. Now, what is the error in the thinking that causes this, this infectious demise of Western communities? You have the Western world, and in the Western world you have local communities. Now, the error is very simple. People don't think collectively. Okay. Do I have to say it again? People refuse. That's better. People refuse to think collectively. This whole privacy myth, this whole personal space myth, because it's a myth. It doesn't exist in physical reality. It doesn't even exist in spiritual reality at all. It doesn't even exist anywhere. But we hold it high. We construct it and we enforce it on each other. That myth of willing whatever you will is your life. You can will it however you want it. That myth that we use to justify the forfeiting of collective responsibilities, that is what's causing the demise of the Western world. Just think about it. If you have a community somewhere, they live in a territory, everyone that resides in that community, both insiders and outsiders, have a collective responsibility to that community. Yes, people have individual wills as individual creatures, but they are part of the bigger picture, they're part of the bigger whole. So as a part of the bigger whole, everyone must regard the well-being of the bigger whole. I'm not just talking about traffic signs, or that you're quiet in the library, or I'm not just talking about such conventions. Traffic signs are practical conventions to prevent accidents and death on the road. So that's understandable. That you have a currency that you pay with, that's also a practical thing to, so there isn't any confusion in transactions. So I'm not talking about those mechanical things. I'm talking about the well-being of the whole community. That should be first. Because without the community, you can't function as an individual creature. You can't. So, in every culture that functions properly, the collective is placed on number one, and individuals are required to be in service of the bigger whole. And those that refuse to comply with their collective responsibilities are shunned, or in some cases, they're expelled or even killed. That is how it goes in the world in general. But in the Western world, they have this self-destructive experiment of putting the subjective individual will of the creatures above the well-being of the whole community. And people, though to their narcissistic attitude, though to their relief-seeking mindset, they grasp it. Oh, it's your life. You can will whatever you will. Oh, great. I can will whatever I will. Oh, that means I don't have to be responsible towards other people. Oh, I can just be left off the hook. I can be just left alone. Great. Oh, and people will applaud me being left alone. Great. Privacy. I can do all kinds of dirty stuff and people can't hold me accountable. Great. People just take it, take it, take it. Even many believers do that. And what happens in the long run? When dysfunction appears in the community, nobody wants to face it. Now, don't get me wrong. In all communities throughout human history, there was denial. Okay? But in the Western world, not only do they deny dysfunction, but they're denying. They are positively enforcing. With positive, I mean, they seriously think they're doing the good thing, doing the right thing, I mean, by enforcing this self-destructive illusion that everything is fine and that everything functions fairly. No, it doesn't. And here's the thing. When an individual goes through something traumatic, they go through a shock, they need to process the shock. Not only mentally, but also the body needs to process it. Okay? If you don't process it well, later on you will have issues, and those issues can get out of hand. So people know that when an individual goes through something, even if the individual isn't aware of it, the individual needs to process it. Okay? That's why there are certain professions, and they figure out that you had some traumatic experience a few years earlier, and they can see that you haven't processed it well. They will tell you, come take this job. This job's going to be too much for you. They're practical. But there's also this knowledge since ancient times that communities have to process collective trauma. When a natural disaster happens and many people die, or when there's this much crime in the community that costs the lives of many, or when there was a civil war, or they have been invaded by a foreign nation and they've been exploited. Whenever a collective trauma occurs, everyone in that community, and also people that later join the community, need to process it. Now you may think, Rashid, why do people that join the community need to process it? Listen. When you join a community, you join also what affects them. You join also what's coming after them. Okay? So if you become part of the community, you also deal with the issues that the community is dealing with. So everyone in a community needs to process collective trauma. And in order to process collective trauma, you need to think collectively. You get what I'm saying here? But in Western thinking collectively is associated with fascism. It's associated with what they call communism, which wasn't communism at all, because there was nothing common in communism. Well, what was common was the denial of many people, but real communism never occurred. Only with Christ. Real communism that everyone looks up from another happened in the kingdom of God. And it's still happening today locally. But in the world was never communism. But they call communism is better socialism, but okay. Thinking collectively is associated with dictatorship, associated with let me say tyrannical regimes that committed genocide and all of that. Think collectively is associated sometimes with Nazism and all of that, but that's all bullcrap. Every community needs to think collectively. That's natural. Or else you can't remain healthy as a community. And when the community isn't healthy, neither will individuals be healthy. So collective health precedes individual health. The other way around, individuals are part of the bigger whole, so individuals have their natural responsibility to the community. You get what I'm saying here? That's why I told you in previous videos, this whole no snitching, mind your own business attitude is BS. It is. If you're in a community, I mean, let's say a small community, and there are people harming their kids because their parenting styles are out of control and you allow it to happen because it's their life, it's their will, and mind my own business, those children become adults Evil spirits have easy access to them because they're traumatized, and those evil spirits will use those people to harm the whole community. So by you allowing those parents to will whatever they will, you're contributing to child abuse because you allow it to happen, and not only that, you're contributing to the destruction of your own community. If parents need to be kept in check, just like everyone else needs to be kept in check. If you think parents can be out of line because it's their will, then you are agreeing against your own safety. Because that parent is out of control. Once the children are grown up and they can't unleash themselves on you anymore, on whom are they going to unleash their dissatisfaction? You ever thought about that? If the children survive and are well off, they heal, you still have narcissistic predators around you who think it's alright to relieve themselves at the expense of helpless human beings. And those helpless human beings were dependent upon them. That's how cowards are. So you still have those narcissistic, violent cowards around you that you enable by giving them the right to will whatever they will. But that is how it often goes in the Western community. Western society, I mean. Well, Western world is a better term. Now, don't get me wrong. Tolerance of child abuse or denial of child abuse have been present throughout history. However, in cultures where they at least acknowledge the reality of collective well-being, they acknowledge, okay, if this happens and a lot of people tolerating child abuse, there must be something at the other side to compensate for it, so things won't get out of it. You get what I'm saying here? But in the Western world, they have this idea, it's your life, nobody's responsible for you, you have to do it your way. They even have this thing that you are your own God. So everything that ever happened to you is your own fault. They go very far in it. And look at this. Now that dysfunctions are appearing over the generations, the previous two generations already experienced the dysfunctions, but they denied it. Now the present two generations, and that's mine and the one after it, they're now seeing the dysfunctions clearly. The dysfunction that the previous two generations enabled. So you would expect now that the current two generations would think, you know what, we need to forfeit the ways of our ancestors, because what these people are doing, whatever they've done is self-destructive. What we are doing now is following their ways, so we will end up worse than they, because they already died. But some are about to die. We're still alive, we're reaping the self-destruction. If we continue in the self-destruction, we'll be worse off than they were. At least during their time, there was some delay in destruction, but the destruction is very nigh onto us. But what does the present generation do? They deny it. Or they look for self-destructive solutions, which aren't solutions at all. Some remain completely in denial. They have a little bubble. They have, as they say in Dutch, their cup of tea, so they're fine. They don't care about anyone else. Others join rebellion movements, thinking they're doing the right thing by fighting violence with violence. Others go into pagan Christianity and hoping for some rapture to take place. It's avoidance. And others are joining doomsday cults, wanting the world to end, become hysterical. And then you have those, well, they are in denial, they have a cup of tea, as I mentioned before, and they are like zombies. They don't even want to see nor hear anything. Instead of facing what's going on. Look, if a community does not think collectively, they'll perish. Plain and simple. And here's the thing. Pagan societies in the past, and some even today, they recognize this. Yes, they are pagan. Okay, so I'm not going to praise them, but I'm going to say they were practical. They realized that the well-being of the collective well-being precedes individual well-being. And the policies they took were to enforce collective well-being. Now, in doing this, they often sacrifice individual lives. So I'm not in agreement with that. Absolutely not. You don't have to sacrifice individual lives in blood sacrifice and all that demonic crap just to preserve the collective well-being. That's what the pagans do. Okay, but I'm not into that. I don't even agree with it. Neither should you. But they were practical. The Western world is not practical at all. Absolutely not. it's not just the EU, or it's not just Brexit, it's not just a right-wing extremists. It's a whole way of thought, the way of thinking that the Western world prescribes that's in error. But because it pleases the relief seeking of the population, many in the population don't want to see the error. Because once they see the error, they need to take responsibility to look for help, to seek for they have to look for deliverance, and need to go for deliverance, and they need to forfeit their old ways. That also implies forfeiting exploitative benefits they're holding on to. Exploitative benefits are benefits at the expense of others. Now, I'm not talking about things like, let me say, like welfare, because the banks in this world, they create money out of thin air. So they can create an infinite amount of money out of thin air and transfer it to people's bank account, which is just numbers on the screen, and people have welfare. Nobody dies, nobody gets hurt. So I'm not talking, as some right-wing people say, against the left, because this whole left versus right is also a prison, a mental prison that's enforced upon you. You have to look beyond it. But that's the error that's causing the demise of the Western world. Yet a lot of folks of the Western world, even migrants that adapt to the Western world, they blame the migration crisis. They blame the liberals. They blame people that, according to them, don't want to contribute to society. It's none of that. It's that sick, self-willed way of thinking that the Western world prescribes onto people that's destroying the same Western world. When you look, for example, at the Chinese civilization, let me say, the Chinese civilization, okay, which was formed at the establishment of the ancient Han dynasty in the 3rd century BC, shortly after the foundation of the Greek Empire by Apollo or Helios or Alexander the Great, the Chinese Empire remained intact. There were dynasties that changed over the centuries, of course. The reason China remained in existence as a bloc, and the reason it remains till this day as a bloc under a socialist regime, well, whatever you want to call that, is because they put the collective well-being above individual well-being. Now, about the generation of Chinese people today, there is some change in it, but overall the Chinese civilization lost it. Not because of the emperors, because the emperors, the imperial regime was a parasitic regime, demonically inspired, that drained the people, straight up. But the people that live there, the local elders, in local communities, they acknowledge that collective well-being goes above individual well-being. Yes, individual well-being is also relevant, but you can't have long-term individual well-being without collective well-being. Let's look at Japan, for example. Japan, as you can call civilization, which began in the 2nd century AD at the formation of Yamatai, which the Yamatai Confederacy that later changed into the Yamato Empire, which later renamed Nippon, which means the land of the rising sun. Now, who's the sun? You know that it's Apollo. That's a big roots of this world. They worship Apollo, or Helios, as he's also called. They also acknowledge collective well-being goes above individual well-being. Now, I'm not in agreement that they do blood sacrifices and all of that, no. But at least they were practical in they were practical in the thinking that they conditioned people in. Now, that thinking was exploited by those same people, okay? So I'm not in agreement with exploitation, but at least they were realistic. A lot of folks today don't want to be realistic at all. They want to pick up their smartphones. Let me just show it. They pick up their smartphones, and when you go in public, they are into their smartphones. Sometimes you're not even talking to people. They're not communicating with people. They're just playing a game. Or they watch a movie. They're so into their smartphones. Again, also in China and Japan, you will see this phenomenon now. Okay, so I'm not putting them at the pedestal and debasing the West. I'm not doing that. I'm just evaluating things here. A lot of folks just want to be in a smartphone. Now, in the past, when you had newspapers, they did the same thing in newspapers. So avoidance has been with us since the fall of man. Okay, so I'm not saying that that's anything new. But what you see in the Western world is that the avoidance is pathological. And it's this pathological avoidance which comes from the collective pathological denial that's destroying them. Unless folks collectively rise up and realize we need to face ourselves and deal with our stuff, by the next 2 generations, there probably won't be any Western world anymore. Or if there's still a Western world, it will be like a ghetto, for real. If I'm proven to be wrong in the future, I'm wrong. Okay, you can call me out on it. I don't mind. Okay. Now, there's one more thing I want to add. In the Netherlands now, it's almost December. There's this controversy about Black Peter as a figure derived from the Swiss Guard or from the Middle Ages, which are black folks that were knights in Europe. But people associate with slavery. They call it, there's also called blackface, I believe, in outside the Netherlands. And there's a lot of controversy around it. Well, I've spoken about Black Peter in a video I made about 2 years ago. You can watch it. And people talk about slavery and the past of slavery. They are missing the point. When slavery was abolished in the 1800s, I believe in the 1830s, Britain abolished it, and they, for the next 2 decades, enforced it all around the world. When the black slaves received their freedom, they moved on. They acknowledged the past, and it was still policies against them, but they overcame and overruled them. When Japan in the 1860s opened its doors to trade to the outside world, you also had blacks over there, black entrepreneurs trading with Japan, while their parents might still have been slaves on plantations. You had blacks going to the German Empire that emerged in the 1870s. So you had blacks in Europe trading in the German Empire, speaking German. They went to Austria-Hungary. They even went to China. I mean, they were everywhere. They were all over the place. They developed their own institutions, their own police forces, their own universities, their own, what they call, Wall Street. They moved on. Well, there were attacks on them, that's for sure. And after the Second World War, that means around the 1960s, there was this policy that emerged in the United States, which the rest of the world followed into, in which everyone had to assimilate nationally. All economies had to form one economy, because in the United States you had the states economies of the federal states, but you also had the black economy, you had the so-called white economy. So things were a bit separated. They wanted to merge all together. Well, in the 1970s, it was proven to be a disaster, and that's how many ghettos emerged. There was a lot of economic neglect of communities, in both white communities, Hispanic communities, black communities. But the media only shows the falling apart of the black communities, as if only they have ghettos. Okay? So what you see today among what they call the black community, or however you want to call it, it's the result of the policy failures of the 1960s and 1970s. Don't link it to slavery, because black folks, if you want to call them that way, I'm not talking about Africans that remained in their homeland for centuries, but black folks, they process things. They have no choice but to process things. They have to be real. And despite all they've been through, they're still tribe and community, as not as a community, but as a people. And don't realize that those entrepreneurs and those global corporations, they use black folks as their experiments before they bring the products to the market, because they see value in those people. If many of those so-called black folks will see themselves. So to link challenges in ethnicities today to slavery is not the answer. When it comes to the Western world, the so-called white population, if you want to call them that way, or Caucasians, they have their own collective traumas that they need to deal with. First World War, Second World War, and also after Second World War, there was collective violence throughout Europe, with much murders, though the collective violence. Those are things they need to face and process, instead of focusing on the issues of the migrants. Now, the migrants may have issues, or blacks may have issues, but they face them. They may not process them. Not all black communities process it the right way. Let me be clear about that. Think about Black Lives Matter, how that turned out. But at least they acknowledge things. Caucasians, if you want to call them that way, need to start facing things, and not blame it either on the EU or on the migrants or on whatever. Well, this video has turned into a rant, but I hope I've opened your eyes to what's going on around you now. How will this work out? Time will tell. For you, agree with Christ and be at peace.